Feed Your Family Tonight podcast. Each week, we are serving up motivation and inspiration to help you get weeknight dinner on the table, letting you recapture a little calm in the crazy. And now, your host, speaker, author, and married mother of four, Mariefiebach.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Feed Your Family Tonight podcast, episode 114. I'm your host, Mariefiebach, and today we're going to talk about why weeknight family dinners are not about the recipes. It is the new year. I've had a couple of weeks of rest. I hope you have had a little bit of rest with your family as well. I am back and so excited with a bunch of new ideas for Feed Your Family Tonight to help you in this new year. I spend a lot of time speaking to moms groups and PTOs, and when I walk into a new room, a lot of them will say, I just can't wait to get some new recipes. If you have ever heard one of my talks live, you will know that I don't give out very many recipes. Now, I'm not saying that recipes are bad, because we do need recipes, but getting weeknight dinner on the table is not about the recipe. It is about time management, energy management, and taking a real assessment of the kinds of foods that your family prefers and the kinds of foods they don't prefer. Recipes are not going to fix your weeknight dinner woes. Now you're going to say, no, recipes are great. They totally can fix my weeknight dinner problems. I just found a recipe last week and I made it and it was great and my family liked it and I had a weeknight dinner success. And I'm going to say yes, but I want to teach you why that recipe was a success. Because a recipe in your family that's a success is not necessarily a recipe that is going to be a success in my family. So let's think about that recipe that you made last week that worked really well. There were several steps that you either made consciously or unconsciously that made that recipe work for your family and made it a weeknight dinner success. The first thing is you chose the right recipe. When you are looking at a recipe, I suspect that you are looking at how much time does it take to make, what kind of flavors are in this recipe, and when you're doing that, you are thinking, how would this recipe fit in my family's schedule, and will my family like it? So let's break that down a little bit further. The first thing is time. How much time does it take to make that recipe? Is it the kind of recipe that you have to be standing at the stove, physically cooking like a stir fry? Or is it the type of recipe that you can prep ahead and have in your freezer and throw in your Instant Pot on a busy night? What kind of recipe is it? And what kind of time commitment does it take from you to get it on the table? What kind of ingredients and flavors are in there? When you are finding a recipe to feed your family and you're trying to get something new into your weekly routine, the easiest thing to do is to look at the flavors and the ingredients. And you can't have new for both of those things. You can either pick a recipe that has new flavors using familiar ingredients, or you can have a recipe that uses familiar flavors with new ingredients. Let me give you an example of that. For years, my family did not eat rice noodles, but they started liking stir fries, and I decided that I was going to try and make a stir fry, and instead of serving it over rice, I served it over rice noodles. So the flavors were familiar, but the ingredients were different. Here's another example. Maybe your family likes chicken in a sauce. The flavors that you usually have for that are Italian flavors like oregano and garlic. But you saw a recipe for chicken tikka masala, and it was basically a tomato sauce, but it had different flavors like cumin and coriander and garam masala. The base ingredients are familiar, but the flavors are different. And I suspect that recipe that you picked last week that worked either had familiar flavors or familiar ingredients. The next thing that made that recipe work in your family was that you deemed it quote unquote easy, which means you needed to think about what your family's schedule was like. You needed to think about what your energy levels were like. And you picked a recipe that you could manage on a particular kind of night. You're not going to stumble across a recipe for beef Wellington and make it on a Tuesday. You might make that for a special family dinner, but you're not going to make it on a weeknight. And when you're looking for recipes to improve your weeknight dinners, you are looking for recipes that fit into a certain type of time frame. Perhaps it's a slow cooker recipe. Perhaps it's a freezer prep recipe. Perhaps it's a recipe that you can do start to finish in 30 minutes or less. All of those recipes work on different kinds of nights in your home. And you made that calculation that this recipe that you tried would work on one of those kinds of nights. The next thing you did is you looked at your ingredients in your house. You said, I've already got half of these ingredients. The only thing I have to buy is one or two things at the grocery store. You put it on a list and you purchased those groceries. And you planned to cook that recipe and executed it on a night that it worked in your schedule. The fourth thing you actually did was cook it and serve it. And how many times have we bought ingredients thinking that we're going to try and make a recipe and then we never actually get around to it? And then the food goes to waste. If that has happened to you, you are not alone. It is not uncommon. We want to try and avoid it, but let's face the reality is that it happens sometimes. So for that recipe that you made last week to work in your home and make dinner work, you had to choose the right recipe that fit your schedule. It fit the flavors that your family was going to like or the ingredients that your family liked. You deemed it easy because you calculated that that type of dinner would work on a specific type of night in your home. You planned enough ahead to look at what your ingredients you had on hand, buy the groceries, and then actually take the time to make it. That recipe worked not because it was a recipe. It worked because that recipe fit into your family's schedule. And as you move into this new year and you're wanting to add some new recipes, those are the things that you want to consider whether you deem a recipe worth trying or not. Now, I have said this before, and I really want to emphasize this, is I do not recommend trying new recipes on busy weeknights. I highly recommend trying new recipes on the weekends or again during the summer or in a day where you've got a little less pressure, because if you're trying to fit a new recipe on a night and you're running from thing to thing to thing, you are setting yourself up to be stressed and oftentimes to fail. Now, usually you can rescue it and pull it together, but you want to be successful on those busy weeknights. And new recipes are not successful because they are recipes in and of themselves. They are successful because you have put thought and careful planning into the right kinds of foods to serve your family. There are thousands of recipes, millions of recipes in the palm of your hand on your phone. It is so easy to find recipes, and most of them are not going to work for you on a Tuesday night. Because if they did, none of us would have problems getting weeknight dinner on the table, because there is a world of recipes out there. But getting weeknight dinner on the table is not about finding recipes. It's about finding the right recipes, the right flavors, the right cooking methods for the particular kind of night that you are having. As you go into this new year and you start thinking about the kinds of foods that you want to be making for your family, before you go and start spending hours researching new recipes, I want you to think about some of your old family favorites. Maybe something that you haven't made in a long time. This has happened to me twice in the past week, and I don't think it's a coincidence. I was watching someone on Instagram and they were making some version of an egg roll in a bowl. And I thought, oh my goodness, my family really liked that recipe. I have a recipe for egg roll in a bowl if you want it. It's a quick and easy dinner that you can get on the table in 30 minutes or less. And I said, oh my goodness, I have not made that in the longest time. And so I put it on my meal plan for this week because it was something that was familiar, but it's going to feel new because we haven't had it in a long time. My son the other day said, Mom, we have not had meatball subs in ages. Can you make meatball subs? And I thought, yeah, I have not made those in ages. And I made them the other night for dinner. And everyone in my family was like, oh my gosh, these meatball subs are so good. We haven't had them in so long. They taste delicious. So before you start looking for new recipes, I want you to go back to your old master meal planning sheet. And if you don't have one, get a copy. It's free at feedyourfamilytonight.com/master. There is a version for people that eat animal proteins and a version for people that are mainly vegan or vegetarian. And I want you to start filling that out this year because then you can go back and look at some of these things that you haven't made in a long time and bring them out. And they're going to feel new to your family, but it's going to save you the stress of testing a recipe that may or may not work in your home. When you've done that and you're still wanting to kind of get some newness into your weeknight dinner routine, when you look at new recipes, I don't want you to think about if this recipe looks good or not. I want you to think about what kind of night would you make this recipe on? It is a recipe that you have to do a lot of prep the day before, but you put it in the slow cooker and it's hands off all day. Is it the type of recipe that you can do start to finish in 30 minutes? What kind of day are you going to have where you will make that recipe? How much of a time commitment is it going to take for you to make that recipe? What kind of flavors and ingredients are in that recipe? And next week, I'm going to dig deep into flavors and ingredients and how you can make those work in your home, especially when you're trying new things. Weeknight family dinners are not about the recipes. It is more about time management, looking at your family and being honest about the kinds of foods that they like to eat and the kinds of foods that they do not prefer, and putting those all together in meals that work in your home. It's a short podcast this week, friends, but I think I gave you a lot to think about. The next time you look at a recipe and are assessing whether or not it's one to try in your home, I've given you some things to think about so that when you do try new recipes, you choose the right ones, but know that most of Weeknight Family Dinner is more about time management and managing the type of foods that your family likes to eat than it is about finding recipes. I can't wait to get a discussion about this going in the Feed Your Family Tonight Facebook group. Join me over there. It will be so fun to talk with you and see what kinds of flavors and what kinds of preparation methods work in your home. So for now, friends, Happy New Year and take care.
Thanks for listening to Feed Your Family Tonight podcast with your host, Mariefiebach. If you like the show and want to know more, please visit feedyourfamilytonight.com. And if you'd like to help support the show, please leave a rating or review on iTunes or Apple Podcast. It helps spread the word that you can feed your family tonight.